Interior of Canada, 1880. In the villages near the boreal forests, winter wasn't a season. It was a sentence. When the snow covered the ground up to their knees, people would retreat indoors, fall silent, and avoid those who didn't belong. He, however, did the opposite. While residents reinforced windows and closed doors, he entered the forest. He carried a shovel, an axe, and a lamp. Not a word. No company. They said it was a mistake, that it would be just another body frozen in the spring. But he dug, day after day. The ice on the ground didn't give way easily. Time was running out. The snow was thickening. He didn't ask for help. He didn't try to prove anything. He just kept going. An old hunter said, "When the cold doesn't kill you from the outside, it kills you from the inside." The shelter wasn't just for protection against the snow. She was against everything that came before her. The northernmost villages in Canada in 1880 were not made only of wood and stone. They were made of silence, suspicion, and tradition. There, every face was familiar. Every deviation was noticed. Men were born, lived, and died among the same trees, the same hunting trails, the same names engraved on church bells. At the edge of the village of Bramble Creek, where the fences no longer held back the wind, he appeared. Nobody knew his name. They said it came on long trains that crossed territories like cold scars on the map. He carried a folded blanket on his back, a worn backpack, and eyes that didn't ask for permission, only for passage. At the store, he tried to trade an old knife for dried seeds and lamp oil. The attendant looked at the carved cable with suspicion. "That won't buy winter, stranger." No one laughed. No one offered any support. He slept under an old, fallen roof, among damp straw and branches. While the others talked about the snowstorm forecasts, he watched the wind rustling through the leaves, listening to how the silence settled on the earth. They called him the digger when they thought he couldn't hear. He came to die quietly in the forest, they said one morning between cups of coffee and stale bread. But he kept going, always inward. He carried rope, stones, and splinters. He would return with his body covered in dirt. One afternoon, a child saw him pushing logs into a hidden valley. "What is he doing?" The father gripped the boy's arm tightly. "Nothing that concerns you." Winter began with frost on the branches. Then, a white silence enveloped the trails. Families shut themselves in their homes, wood in the ovens, salt on the meat. Meanwhile, he disappeared further and further into the trees, and the trees swallowed him up. There was no visible bonfire, not even smoke, only footprints that disappeared into holes in the ground. The valley where he began digging had no name. It lay beyond the last bend of the frozen river, a place even hunters avoided passing after midday. The trees there were shorter, the winds more biting, but the soil had something in it. On the first morning he arrived with an improvised iron stake. It pounded against the hardened earth, repeatedly. The sound was dry, metallic, as if the world were saying no. He responded with silence and insistence. It took days just to remove the frozen layer, hands wrapped in thick cloth, twisted branches like levers, an absurd routine in the eyes of any ordinary man. In a village where every minute before the snowstorm was used to stockpile salt and reinforce windows, he wasted energy digging holes. "He's digging his own grave," said a woman at the butcher shop. "Or hiding something worse," murmured the blacksmith. But he wasn't listening. Or rather, he listened to everything, and followed along. He began shaping an entrance using thin logs, fitted together like wooden ribs. He made an arch out of roots, tied together with strips of tree bark, and then he covered it with dry moss, branches, and mud. From a distance, it looked like nothing. Up close, it looked like survival. He used his own body heat to melt the ice around him. He built a small controlled fire inside a side pit. Using round stones, it began to store underground heat. There were no windows, no luxury, just a womb of earth and fire. At night, the valley grew dark early. He would light a lamp attached to a hook, and there, underground, he would adjust details like a silent craftsman. There were no maps, no plans drawn up, just rhythm, and time, and an increasingly impatient cold. In the third week, the forest changed color. It wasn't just the wind, which was now whistling between the tree trunks as if searching for cracks. Not even the snow, which had already covered the footprints in less than an hour. It was the smell. Something in the air, damp, metallic, a silent warning. As he dug deeper, he encountered sheets of frozen rock that blocked his progress. No ordinary tool seemed sufficient. The stake bent, the axe handle cracked. Inside the underground chamber, The heat was not retained. The stones no longer heated up. The wood creaked under the weight of the snow piled up above. In the village, a man commented, "It's gone. The ice got it." But a child, the same one who had observed it before, swore he had seen a burning ember on the ground at night. "It's just hell pulling him down," someone replied, laughing. He knew that if the shelter couldn't hold, death would come without warning, without any pain, not even, just a white sleep. So he improvised. He gathered gravel, quartz chips, clay, and pine resin. He made a primitive cement with his bandaged hands. He fashioned new supports using thick cedar roots. He raised, stone by stone, an underground fireplace. He made the fire rise without smoke, and when the temperature dropped to -30 in that silent early morning, he fell asleep. Not in depth, but I'm alive. The next day, he found the entrance almost buried. The snow had fallen heavily during the night. The shovel was frozen inside. He had to break it piece by piece with his bare fingers. The hand bled. Blood flowed all the way to the edge of the entrance. Up above, a fox was watching. In the 4th week, the silence of the forest was broken by a different sound. Not the cracking of branches, not the howling of the wind, but a short scream, almost a groan. It wasn't human, but it wasn't natural either. He followed the trail of jagged marks in the snow, small, disoriented steps, until he found a fawn, alone, trembling, with a broken leg. Nature, at that latitude, did not forgive hesitation. An injured animal was used as bait, and he knew that was a mistake. To stop, to divert energy, to carry a weight that wouldn't nourish the body. But even so, he took off his coat, wrapped the little animal in it, and took it to the shelter. Not out of pity, but for something deeper, something left unsaid. The underground space now shared its heat with another living being. He improvised a bed of moss, heated water with stones, and cleaned the wound with diluted charcoal. The puppy was crying silently. Him too. 2 days later, the consequence came. The entrance to the shelter partially collapsed. The structure was too damp. The internal heat had melted layers of ice around it, weakening the arch of logs. Part of the roof collapsed in the early hours of the morning. The sound was muffled, but the severity was brutal. The cub got trapped under branches and mud. He woke up with dirt in his mouth. He was having difficulty breathing. No light at all. He used the blunt axe as a lever. He pushed with his shoulders. The skin on his arm was torn by the splinters inside the wall. He did everything in silence. When he finally pulled the animal out, there was no movement left. The deer's heart was beating weakly, but he was hitting me. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. He simply reinforced the structure with larger stones taken from the frozen river to the south. It took days. Their hands had lost all color, just movement. In the village, a man commented, "I found a trail of blood coming from the forest." "From an animal?" Another asked. "I don't think so," but nobody went to check. He wasn't coming back. And with the cold intensifying, nobody would go out anymore. In the 5th week, the sky went dark. It didn't get dark. It went out. The wind changed direction and the birds disappeared. The forest, driven by ancient instinct, fell silent. He knew what was coming, not through newspapers, which didn't exist, but by the smell of the snow, different, thick, deep. It was a blizzard. In the villages, people sealed their houses with mud and rags. They were stockpiling the last pieces of salted meat. They would disconnect from the world for days, but he was on land. Underneath it, the shelter held. Inside, the temperature was bearable. The silent fire warmed the stones, which in turn warmed the mud. The cub, now stronger, curled up close to the inner wall. On the 2nd night of the snowstorm, the air thinned, not because of a leak, but because of isolation. The exit was buried. Inside, he began to dig, slowly, to prevent the roof from collapsing. He used a sharpened piece of bone as a shovel. Time has vanished. I didn't know if it was daytime. I didn't know if I was breathing enough. The lamp was swaying. Him too. Hours later, he heard a sound, not from nature. It was a beat, distant, uneven, as if someone were looking for something, or someone. He climbed up carefully. He brushed away snow with his bare hands until he could find air. And then he saw a child, the same boy from the village, lost, alone, amazing. In his eyes, there was no surprise. There was relief and fear. The boy couldn't speak. Her lips were cut. The face, almost white. He pulled the child inside the shelter. He hurriedly closed the entrance. Keeping the boy warm became a priority. He made warm moss compresses. He tore a piece off his own coat. He fed the boy drops of melted fat. The night lasted longer than it should have. Maybe a few days, or the perception of days. The boy didn't ask anything. I was just staring. Sometimes for the puppy. Sometimes it's the clay ceiling above your head. On the third day, when the snow had lessened, he dug a side exit. He made a short tunnel using branches. He carried the boy upstairs on his shoulders. From the top of the hill one could see the white valley. Nothing was moving. The village was shrouded in mist, buried chimneys. The boy pointed. An isolated, semi-destroyed cabin. A sign that your family might be nearby. He walked with the boy to the edge of the woods. He didn't speak. He simply let the boy go. Before he left, he handed him the knife with the carved handle, the same one that nobody wanted to accept in exchange at the warehouse. The boy tightened his grip on the knife. He looked back, and he ran. In the valley, the shelter remained firm. Inside it, only the cub remains now. The man sat down at the entrance, covered in snow up to his knees. The cold was no longer the enemy. It was part of the structure. 3 days after the snowstorm ended, the first sounds returned to the forest. Confused chickens, an axe in the distance, a distant bell. He had already reinforced the entrance to the shelter with frozen stones and roots. The puppy, now standing, risked taking short steps near the exit. Routine returned, but the silence within the man, that had never left him. On the afternoon of the fourth day he heard footsteps, not stealthy, firms. He stood up slowly, with the axe in hand just in case, and then he saw the boy's father, the one who had gripped his son's arm tightly, the one who had ignored him in the village. He was there, with torn clothes, without a coat, with eyes downcast. He stopped a few meters away. He didn't speak. Visible breathing was the only sound between the two. A cloth bag slid down from the man's shoulder. Inside there was darkened bread, some roots, and a bottle wrapped in straw. He held out the bag, with both hands. No pride. For a second, it seemed like he was going to say something, but he gave up. The protagonist picked up the bag. He placed it next to the entrance. Then it disappeared into the earth. He closed the door. Not a word was spoken, but everything was understood. In the village, the story unfolded at a pace that only the cold can provide. Slow, but accurate. The boy spoke little, but displayed the knife with restrained pride. He saved my life, he once said. No one answered. No one doubted it. Some curious residents began to observe the valley from a distance. No one came near, not out of fear, but for something even rarer, respect. In the first spring, when the snow melted and the moss grew back, a group left provisions near a marked stone. No ticket, no names. The following summer, a child left a small folded jacket near the trail, as if returning the care. He never showed up in the village. He never knocked on anyone's door. But when a fire engulfed 3 houses in one night, and the buckets froze before they even reached the flames, someone extinguished the fire with snow pulled from makeshift sleds. It was him, said a woman. Did you see? They asked. She just smiled. With the thaw came the marks. Fallen trees, erased trails, migrated animals. But there was something that resisted, almost as if the forest itself had decided to preserve itself. The shelter. Nobody got too close. But everyone knew he was still there. The cub was seen once, already grown, drinking water from the river at dusk. He did not run away when observed, but he wouldn't let himself be touched either. A child said they saw smoke rising discreetly from an opening in the ground. Another swore she heard rhythmic beats on the ground like distant hammer blows. The old hunter remarked that these sounds didn't come from the hand, but from time. He didn't build a shelter. He built a story, he said without being corrected. In the village, the following winter arrived early. This time a new structure appeared next to the church. A small, semi-buried emergency shelter with an internal fireplace, an arched entrance, and a wall made of pressed clay. No one has said where the model came from, but everyone knew. The boy grew up. He was carrying a knife with a carved handle. He used it to carve dry branches. He never talked much, but I always listened. One day, while retracing an old trail, he found a mark on the tree. 3 vertical lines and 1 horizontal line cutting through them, the symbol for counting time, or lives. Below, stones piled up in silence. No name, no cross. The village changed little by little. People started leaving things at the edge of the forest. seeds, broken tools, wrapped bread, not out of charity, but out of gratitude. He never showed up to say thank you. He never set foot in the central square. He never spoke. And yet his absence was a presence. Your silence, your voice. Some stories are never told. They are buried. Beneath the cold earth, between roots and stone, lie decisions that no one has seen, hands that worked without an audience, lives that saved others, without knowing if they would be remembered. In the forest, nothing is urgent, but everything is decisive, and there are shelters that don't protect against the cold. They protect against being forgotten. If someone ever digs deep enough, they might find the remains of a branch roof, or a marked stone, or just silence. Even so, you will know, someone resisted here, and that changed everything. If this story made you feel something, so others that come along will go too. Sign up to continue walking with us along paths like these. Cold, hard, but full of life. And if you want someone else to see that there is still strength in silence, leave a like. The forest thanks you. History too.